Hi, everyone. Welcome to Babylon Irons. So you have a special guest here today. We have Sloth with us, and we also have Sloth as well. So, guys, we've gone from having pretty much zero activity, waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting some more for Declan Rice to go. He's finally gone, and all of a sudden, we appear to be awoken from our inertia, and not only have we got a bid that seems to be accepted on one player, we've got an imminent bid for another player going in, according to TalkSport, and we're maybe looking at maybe another 3 midfielders and a number of left backs because one is going. So loads going on at the moment. We'll dive into it, and before we start evening, thank you for tuning in, guys. So to try and give this some sort of semblance of order, let's start with straight off the bat the bid that's gone in today. With Borges, £14 million rumoured to be accepted with Manchester City, potentially with a sell-on clause. What are your guys' initial thoughts? What do you think about that? Is it good? Is it bad? Are you kind of indifferent?
Go ahead, Sloth. I'll let you go.
I mean, I think it's really exciting. He is rumoured to be one of the biggest talents in that sporting academy, and when they produce the likes of Foden, when you hear something like that, you think, wow, okay, that's a serious player then. In terms of me watching him, I'd not really watched any of him until a few months ago. When I watched that youth game against Derby, and of course he scored that just hilarious goal. I couldn't help but laugh because I went back and watched highlights and clips of him after, and he's so quick that you can't help but laugh. It's frightening. So I think he does seem very one-footed from the limited bits I've seen. Obviously, that's something that if he wants to be a top player, needs to change. It just has to. And however,
well, unless you're Arjen Robben, then you can get away with being left-footed.
Yeah, but I mean that's part of what made him so dangerous, isn't it? Because everyone knew if he cut on his right, it's unpredictable. But I mean, who else do we have in the squad who's a bit like that and could potentially be leaving? Yeah. But I do think the idea of having him in the side, having him play off someone like Scamacca, link up with Bowen is fantastic. Obviously, homegrown boost as well. And yeah, if the 14 million price tag is accurate, I just think it's a brilliant addition.
Yeah, Slob, what about you? How do you feel about it?
Yeah, so I mean, just want to shout out Andrei Yarmolenko, another one-footed wonder. If only Chelsea knew that he had only 1 foot, Okay. Anyways, so Borges has been a guy on my radar for a long time. I think he's a class player. I think that he's got a lot of skills, a lot of room to grow, but that, the room to grow is just growing to a superstar. I think that, he could come in and play in the Premier League. I don't know if he starts, right away, but I think, it's one of these players where with the Moyes system, give him time into the squad, by sort of November, December, January, I think that he'll start clicking. And, I think just based on sort of what I've seen and heard, really good player off the pitch as well. I've seen some Man City, fans saying today that, he'd be a fan favorite, pretty much right off the bat for us. Just on sort of one thing is, when Rice was being linked to Man City and we're all saying, 100 million plus a player, I was saying him and Harwood Bellis, and I would take a much lower offer for, getting him in. So I think that says a lot about the players. I mean, I'm just me, but I'd be excited about this coming in. Just on the sort of money standpoint, one small thing, it looks like it would be a sell-on clause or a buyback or both, similar to what Lavia has been done at Southampton. If we look at the numbers for Lavia, it was 10 million for Southampton to get him from City, with a 40 million buy-on clause. So if we sort of look at that, I mean, hopefully it's 50 million buyback. So
you'd like to think it's a 3 to 4 times the value of the initial. Yeah, that's what you'd like to think, because that's what's going to be. It's what we mentioned earlier when we on our video that you would like to think that any kind of initial investment is 3 to 4 times back if City come in, because £42 million wouldn't be that bad if we have him for 2 to 3 years and then that's the money that comes in. But also, it means that he's done incredibly well, which is only good for us. So it's not something to be sniffed at. I know people would argue that, well, they're probably getting below the market value, but we don't know what the market value is going to be in 2-3 years anyway. We may see a change in transfers. We just don't know with new FIFA rules coming out all the time about buy-ons and so on. But a player that is moving on to something different. Again, much maligned player, one that definitely has been on this channel for much of the year and much of last year. But Aaron Cresswell looks like he's going to be on the move. Looks like Wolves are willing to offer him a much longer contract than we ever were willing to give him. Again, we'll likely get some decent football. It seems like a logical deal for Cresswell, to be honest. And from our perspective, it actually seems like, me and Sloth were big detractors about him getting a new contract. But it does feel now that giving him that 1 year deal was actually really smart, because if the intention was to then sell him or to at least try and get some money for him, it actually now, when you think it in hindsight, hats off, it's actually a smart deal. But what do you guys think about him going? Are you happy with that? And do you think the reason why we are so willing to let him go is because we are actually advanced in bringing in someone else?
I mean, I'll start. I have a very quick. I like the player. I don't like the age. I think that would be good on sort of that side of things. Homegrown worries me, and the biggest thing actually for me is set pieces, and that's all I'm just going to sort of say on that piece. But I think that he'll always be respected at the club, and if he goes, then I think it's good for him and good for the club.
I think, just to go quickly on that, I think set pieces, if Moyes gets his way, that might be covered, but we'll touch on that in a bit. But Sloth, what are your thoughts on Cresswell, and who potentially would you like to see coming off? So we'll go into the actual targets, but who would you like to see in off the bat?
I think it's a really interesting one in terms of it's such a big transition in terms of our long-term members of the squad, and seeing someone like Cresswell go, it does kind of make you wonder, oh, well, he was a bit of a figurehead in the dressing room by all accounts. However, I don't think he's got the ability to play at the top level consistently. I don't, mean that with massive disrespect. I just don't think he's a great left back in terms of, I don't think any other side pushing for top 6 or 7 would sign him. They might keep him around the squad, but again, that's not why. That's not what he's going to get. He's going to get minutes here and there. He's not going to be on the number 1 pick. And I just think moving to Wolves, it's obviously they've snapped up Dawson as well in recent times. So I think for them, they need these sort of mature leaders on and off the pitch who can help them with the squad, and especially help them with the players that they tend to buy and sign, bring them in, settle them down. Cresswell and Dawson would be great at that. But in terms of, what we're losing, I think we've pretty much replaced him already with Emerson. He's a player who's got much more experience at a European level, international level, and also is just, I do think he's a better left back. He's got different skill sets, obviously much more suited to that left wing back role, but it does open up the moves for someone who, we discussed in the group chat earlier about Agent Aguerd, and of course pointing out his teammate Triffer, who is a brilliant young left back, someone with a really high ceiling, who has, to be honest, a lot of the same attributes in terms of technical ability that Cresswell has, but in my opinion is a lot more athletic. He's quicker and is a bit better defensively, and that's probably only reflective of Cresswell's recent seasons. When he first joined, I'd say they're probably about that same level. And when he had that great season at the Boleyn, that's probably the sort of level we're talking with Truffert. So if he is the player coming in, that French left back who's rumoured, I think that is a really, really good deal. And to me, it's an upgrade. I know that might not be everyone's favourite comment. Cresswell is and should be regarded very highly, even regardless of your opinions on his performances in that Europa League campaign. You shouldn't just be singling that out, because there is more to his game and his time at West Ham. But I think I would say thank you for your service, and happily kind of see him go on and thrive and get more of a contract length. So I do think it's kind of a step in the right direction. For me, we were talking about those contracts and giving players. I think it was either going to be give him an extra contract and let Ogbonna leave, or potentially let Ogbonna leave and then just kind of keep one stalwart of the side. And I think we've now seen that Ogbonna's going to be that one who is very much spreading the love of the club, join the dressing room together, and trying to get that sort of gel and team spirit.
Yeah, Slob, how do you feel about it? Do you think it's a good move for us? And more importantly, who do you want to see come in? Regardless of who we've been linked to, who is it that for you would like to see in that role? Obviously, Kirk has gone, so you can't say him. But who would you like to see?
Yeah, Truffert would be probably top of my list. There has been some rumblings, Tagliafico, but I think that's a mistake. I think that he's a bit on that older side as well. But yeah, Truffert would be great. Merlin as well, and then Bard. So, I mean, the French left backs that we could be getting, that mystery left back. I mean, you have a bunch of really good ones to choose from. Borna Sosa is still a guy that I would take a look at from the German league, but it sounds like he only wants Champions League football. So maybe next year. But
yeah,
I mean,
there's also Ishmael Jacobs as well. Has been another one who's been linked, obviously. Mitchell, who is at Monaco, who was once talked around as possibly coming to West Ham. Good friends with Mark Noble. Apparently has been recommending Ishmael Jacobs. So what's your guys' takes on him? Do you think that one's just one of those that is just out there, not going to happen? Because, again, as we know with Moyes, he likes Prem proven, or at least known Prem. Or, as we've seen in the past, if a player is willing to recommend, he will side with that player. So do you feel that Truffert, essentially, based on the list that has been put out, which is Ishmael Jacobs, Melvin Bard, and Truffert, that he is the only logical one we will go for of that list, purely because he is a player that will be recommended by a known player, and a player that obviously he's going to want to help ingratiate more into the squad next year?
When is whatever West Ham do logical, Mike? That's that's probably the more relevant question. But I think it does make the most sense, in my opinion. Obviously, going with what Slob was just saying, I think if we wanted to kind of add the set piece threat that we're losing with Cresswell, Sosa is a fantastic idea to go down. And, he can play on that left side. He can add a lot in terms of being able to play left wing back or even further forward. I don't really think we'll be in the running for him. I've got a sneaking suspicion that there might be certain other sides going for him in the long run, especially if the 15 million is a correct figure, the rumoured figure. But I do think Truffert on that list is probably the best option, particularly in terms of his overall game. Ishmael Jacobs, I know, tends to he's got a bit, not an attitude, but he does switch off a lot during games and towards the end of the season, it was very clear there was a rift with his decision making and his headspace as well. That was what was being rumored a lot. So I don't think that really fits in with Moyes' idea of who should join West Ham.
Yeah. So let's get on to the West Ham merry-go-round of targets, which is the midfield position. So let's face it, we've had a plethora of players put forward. Let's start from the top. So we've had Paulinho, we've had Alvarez, we've had Zakaria, we've had Fofana, we've had James Ward-Prowse. We have also had, I'm sure I'm missing someone here, obviously Alex Scott, we've also had as part of that list. And I am missing another midfielder whose name is Conor Gallagher is another one that we've had. So all of these names are coming up. Again, all of those players give completely different combinations to midfield. The players that seem to be the kind of at the forefront are players that don't necessarily, actually, no, it's not they don't necessarily, they do not in any way, shape or form replicate Declan Rice in the aggregate, nor do they build Declan Rice in the aggregate and then massively improve on Souček, in which to, again, bring our midfield at least up to that same level, which obviously then makes some confusion. But let's talk about Paulinho first. So obviously we had a first bid go in that got rejected. Fair play to Fulham. They rejected £40 million. They want a bit. I say a bit more. They want a lot more. Obviously, no bid has yet to go in, but I'm gonna ask a question. I think I know what you guys are going to say as to what your limit is. My limit's already been passed, but with Paulinho, do you have an upper limit you would be willing to go to in which to at least give Moyes maybe one target he is after this summer with him, or do you just think that, you know what, we've hit a point where we shouldn't go any further with Paulinho, regardless of him being a good player? He's not necessarily going to improve us to a point where the price, you can kind of mitigate against that price, and because it's the player manager wants and is going to bring so much for improvement.
Go on, Slav.
Yeah, so I mean, fair play to Fulham. I mean, it's their best player. You know, they set the target of what they want for him, and we have to pay that, and we're not going to. I don't think we get even nearly close enough. We've already passed what I'd pay for him. Now, my sort of valuation and what sort of Fulham values, same thing, the conversation of what we valued Rice and everyone else, you know, same conversation. I also want to shout out, I don't know the Fulham fan that had it, but had put out a tweet that Fulham wants Jared Bowen and they offered 15 million.
Yeah. It's fantastic banter. Yeah, it's really good. I really enjoyed that one.
Really good. I love that. But yeah, I mean, I wouldn't go there. And, you know, the age doesn't fit right with me. There's no real sort of resale value unless we only have them for about a year. That's just not a bit of business that I'd do. I'd say, Moyes, pick another target and we'll get that person for you.
Yeah. Do you share that as well, Sloth? I know we talked about a lot of the time, but, you know, is this a signing that appeases the manager for a year that leaves us then with a financial burden for the next 4 or 5, and maybe a player that a new manager isn't interested in? Because we have to work on the assumption that as it stands, Moyes isn't here next year. So how much do we commit to players that Moyes wants this year, like a Paulinho?
I think it's a strange one. Obviously, there seems to be a lot of outgoings at Fulham at the moment with their whole Mitrovic saga. And apparently they're getting 50 million. So we knew from the start, and I've mentioned it previously, they were never on any pressure to sell. They have the finances that mean they don't need to, and potentially they're going to have to go out and do a massive rebuild as well, because they'll be losing the spine of their side. Apparently he wants to
as well.
Sorry,
apparently their manager as well. 6 million.
Moyes want to go to Fulham?
Okay, yeah. Well, I mean, they're losing a lot. They're losing their manager. And what is it, £20 million a year he's looking at getting out there?
I think it's £40 million a year they've offered him, and it's got a $6 million buyout in his contract at Fulham. So,
I mean, it's a weird one, because I don't really understand the interest in that. He's a good manager, but anyway, that's not what we're talking about. I don't think he adds much more than winning back the ball, breaking up play, and retaining possession. He doesn't advance us in any way, in my opinion. It's a strange one. Obviously, we've mentioned the price. 40 million is about my level, so we've already gone past that. But it is good to hear that he would like to join us. He would want to make that move. I think if ever there's a good sign for players to do that, I like hearing that sort of thing. Obviously, if they go about it correctly, I think that says a lot about the player. However, for me, I just think, if we're looking at spending 45 million on him, then we need our heads checked, really. It's a case of there are so many better ways to spend that sort of money. And even if you want someone who is a physical unit who breaks up play, go and chuck your 40 million pounds at Everton for Onana. And, they're probably going to fold. I know they're different players, and it's a case of they're probably going to be on about the same wages if you give them a decent contract. So I don't think there's that much to lose. But if we're talking about what you can do with 45 million pounds, or even the sort of money that Fulham are supposedly holding out for,
we'll probably say they bring in we needed.
Yeah, we could bring in someone like the Djibril Sow with Yusuf Fofana, and maybe put money towards someone else. Mm-hmm. If we've got this need to placate Premier League proven, do you know what? I'd even rather move for Conor Gallagher. I know they're different players. I would just get someone to anchor in behind them. I'd rather move for Gallagher, who gives us that tenacity that we know Moyes loves, and save yourself some money, because 25 million is the rumoured price there.
Gallagher's now been said about 40 million. So I think the price is changing day on day.
I don't know if they'll get that at all.
Ultimately, Chelsea need to sell because of financial fair play.
Exactly.
They're going to push for the higher value.
They're going to do. They're going to do what they can. But I just don't think they get it. Not after the season that he's had. Not that he's been bad. It's just Chelsea have been woeful, and I think it's a case of where teams need to be smart. If you leave it till later in the window, I think you've got a good chance of getting him cheaper. Mm-hmm. And yeah, there's so much more you can do with that. If we want someone who Moyes knows or has seen play, go to Frankfurt, go for Sal. I just don't understand why you would waste the money that is being talked about on a player who, look, was very good for Fulham this season, but even then, I think he doesn't progress us in the way that a lot of people seem to think he would.
He's got some good highlights in there. He makes some really cracking, smashing tackles, and he scored some absolute thunderous goals. And that is a great highlight package. You go, oh, look at this defensive midfielder. He can do this and do that. However, when you look at other aspects, like the way he's with his passing and everything, it is on par with Souček. Yeah. And bearing in mind, Souček was talked about as not being good enough and being atrocious. How can you take that player as an atrocious footballer and almost an atrocity on the pitch to then be calling for Paulinho? It's just
that's why I think that the reaction has been as positive as it is towards Paulinho, because people were so emotive over Souček, and they want that change, and they want someone who offers the physicality of him, but they just don't want Souček. And look, if you were giving someone the Souček who joined us versus Paulinho, I'm sorry, but the Souček who joined us was a much better player, and with a very similar skill set in terms of they have the same failures in their game, and it's a case of Souček's going to give you exactly what Paulinho does. He's not as athletic in terms of his speed, and he doesn't quite have the same thunderbolt of a shot on him, but he will score you headers. And if we are to become set piece FC, that is who we need in the squad.
So, Slav, I'm going to bring you in here because obviously you being a big lover of the BVB. For those who don't know who BVB are, that's Borussia Dortmund. What do you feel about Alvarez? Do you feel that maybe we're trying to use Paulinho as a tool in which to drive that one forward of Ajax, because Ajax may see that that money that they're not going to be getting could be going on another player, so to help them or to encourage them to make a decision? Do you think we are prioritising Paulinho over Ederson, or do we think that Ederson is maybe on the same par and we're actually trying to see which one represents the better deal for West Ham?
Yeah, I think it would be trying to find sort of the better deal for West Ham. I think it's also we're trying to figure out what formation we're going to play next year, because one player sort of plays better in one area of the midfield, and Alvarez is very flexible between sort of back line and midfield, and it could suit two different styles. So
it could also allow us not to sign another centre back. There is also that aspect.
That's the risk. But yeah, with Alvarez, the Dortmund links are still there. That's not dead. They're still going on. So a club like Dortmund, that's perennial Champions League. Yes, they play in the Bundesliga, much different than the Premier League, but they're looking for someone to replace Bellingham. And what they need is someone that will be in the midfield, disruptive, make sure winning balls back and be that stopgap between the midfield and the back line. And that's Alvarez. And I think that the comparison between Alvarez and Paulinho is similar. I think Alvarez gives you a bit more, going forward. I think that he has that same sort of Souček reckless abandon in the box. He also has a bit of a bigger, I think, chip on his shoulder. But it's I don't know if it's the right player for us. I don't know if he's a midfielder. I think that, in my personal opinion, I think he's the perfect fit in the back three, in the center of a back three that allows him to step up into the play. But that's a different conversation.
Yeah. So
I said it on the video about him in terms of he's more than comfortable dropping back.
Yeah.
But I think with the centre backs we've signed, with Aguerd, he's more than comfortable taking the responsibility and playing those long balls that we know he can, and getting into the box or joining up with play, whereas Alvarez will just sit back and let him do that. So I think your point about him dropping back into the defence, I think it's one that I think really needs to be highlighted. But Aguerd I think he kind of covers that so well, and he will thrive with that ability to get forward and link up with players. He does have those limits on the ball, but again, I think he's still that little bit better than Paulinho on the ball. And me, I love my players with a bit of marketing as well. So I think it could be a huge marketing coup. And if it's £35 million that we're paying for him, which is supposedly was a stumbling block for Dortmund, I think we should be paying that. If we're talking about £10 million cheaper than Paulinho, then why not do it?
Yeah, so we'll talk about the two hot off the press in a moment. We'll just do the one that has just been dragging around for a while, in Zakaria. Obviously a very talented player, very good player. My own personal opinion is that Zakaria is a player we're looking at purely as a replacement for Souček, who we're going to look to actually move on. That's my own personal opinion. I think that we're looking to sell Souček, looking to bring in his replacement prior to it, and then we'll actively look to sell. That's my own opinion. I don't know what your guys' feeling on Zakaria is. I don't personally feel he's being bought to be the main man as part of the starting 11. That's my view. I think he will be a fantastic player. However, I'm just not convinced entirely that he is the man that we've looked at as that Declan Rice player who can get on the ball and drive from midfield.
I think he's a very, very useful addition. The only issue is going to be that fitness. He does miss games, and I agree. We're hearing rumblings already that there's potentially interest from the Saudi league in Souček. I really worry about his skin, his just ability in that league to cope with that heat, to be honest. I can't imagine what's going to happen as soon as he steps on the football pitch. But in terms of losing him, I do think bringing in someone like my mind's gone completely blank now. I'm just thinking about Paul Souček like combusting in the centre circle. Zakaria, yeah, I do think Zakaria is a very good player on his day. If he's available on that loan to buy, I think the £14 million rumoured fee at the end of it is a solid one. But again, Djibril Sow could you get him for that money? I think it's one where I think Sow suits us a little bit more. I think he perhaps suits the Premier League as well, that bit more. And, he's got no fitness worries. We've already seen him pretty much bully Declan Rice during those 2 legs. And as painful as that is for me to say, I do think that if we wanted to add some sort of Swiss double pivot into the middle of the park, that would be a great addition. You could potentially look at Sow and Zakaria for under £30 million combined, which is really a scary addition. And if we let Souček go for around that fee, bringing 2 players who, they're immediately sort of upping the ante there, I think it'd be a really good deal. Toby's just made a really good point. That Lens scouting system do not miss. If they are looking at him as a replacement for Fofana, they are very different players. Fofana is a lot more attack-minded, and he does offer certain elements of being able to break up the play like Zakaria does, but he is, they're 2 different beasts entirely in terms of what they offer in the game. But if Lens are looking at him, then, they obviously see something there that their scouts can work with and can work on the pitch. But I think I would get him on a loan to buy, and use him to rotate in European games, cup games, see what we can do. If, as you say, the interest in Souček is genuine, move him on and get those other players in, boost that squad, boost the depth, because that's something we've been talking about for a long time, that squad depth lacking. And if we can boost that, add quality in, and lower the age as well of the squad, I think that's a massive coup.
So speaking about lowering the age, West Ham are looking at James Ward-Prowse. So
Lovely.
But not only that, not only are we looking at James Ward-Prowse, we're also looking to help improve that age lowering by offering a player that's 3 years his junior as a make weight in Downs. But Slav, I'll come to you on this.
Yeah.
Do you think it is a good idea maybe to replace or upgrade, depending on, I guess, how you feel about Downs with Ward-Prowse? Obviously, the age is a problem. Again, there is maybe a fee limit you would go to if you are doing a player exchange. So what would be your limit that you would go to for Ward-Prowse, or would you just steer clear and rather keep Flynn Downs next season?
So I'm going to combine the last topic plus this one. So
cheeky.
I think that Zakaria is actually the Flynn Downs upgrade replacement.
Ooh.
Because he fits that where he's not going to be, starting, I don't think, every match. He's a great player to challenge in for the starting 11, but he's a guy that we can roll out in Europa League. He's a guy that can roll out in the FA Cup. So I think he takes that Flynn Downs role, who fits. They're very similar in style of play, in my opinion. And if we can use, say, Downs to, Downs plus a package of 15 million for Ward-Prowse. So Downs plus 15, and say we have a loan with an obligation to buy for Zakaria, and then sell Suchek for 30. We're bringing in Zakaria and Ward-Prowse for Downs and Suchek for break even.
Yeah,
So,
I think if that is an offer or that is the deal on the table, I think even I would begrudgingly say I'd accept that, because it brings in a player that Moyes clearly wants, and he gets the set pieces, he gets his leader that he wants. But also, it's again, if it's £15 million, it's not too bad a deal. The wages are a concern because apparently it's about 100 grand a week. But again, if Zakaria is possible as a loan deal with a view to buy, and Suchek is going, you would argue that's actually smart business, which is what makes me nervous, because as we know, we don't often see us do smart business. But what would you think, you guys? Do you actually think there's actually validity in that kind of the conversation around Ward-Prowse? Do you actually think that is something that maybe has a divide? And we'll go on to one player that has clearly caused a divide at the moment. But do you think there is a divide on whether to kind of bank on these, like, for lack of a better term, elder statesmen of the Premier League, or players within their peak years coming into their experienced years? Do you think that's causing some sort of friction? Because again, how overpriced, shall we say, these players are? Do you think that's a problem?
I think the only problem for me is that, when you look at that Southampton side, there are a lot of players who can add to us, and I think add to us in a better way than James Ward-Prowse can. Mm-hmm. We look at Ahmed Bella-Kotchap. That's a young centre back. Tila Kehrer will know. It's a case of their players like Livramento, Carl Walker-Peters. I've mentioned him time and time again as someone we should be looking at to bring in, who is also homegrown. Lavia. I think there are players there at Southampton who can add a lot to us. It's just a case of, either waiting towards the end of the window until when Southampton are potentially going to have to sell, or these players are getting a bit anxious about getting out of the club who are going to the Championship, and wanting to keep that top level football. I think James Ward-Prowse is very, very good at set pieces. He does flatter deceive in other areas, and I've had this discussion time and time again with people where the stats kind of lie with this player. If ever there's an example of stats lying, I think it's James Ward-Prowse last season. He left Lavia exposed time and time again, and if you talk to Southampton fans who watched him week in, week out, they will tell you that he basically was completely abandoning his role to go and press players and make those challenges and wing back the ball. Were they effective? No, because they got relegated at the end of the day.
And just to stop you there, we do also have Alan Wilson here today, just having fond memories of his time playing against Southampton, and their new ball unveiled as Che Adams. We all have some fond memories of that one for sure. But on his serious note here, the wages will be a problem with Ward-Prowse, and as you say, Sloth, it has flattered to deceive. Again, another player that has a fantastic highlight reel. If you just watch the highlight reel, there is that. I've seen today a lot of one going around of Harry Maguire in the game against Germany, where he had some fantastic pieces. But the funny thing that I noticed that is missing is the part where he completely miscontrols on the edge of the area and gives away a penalty. So again, highlight reels are deceptive. You can look at a highlight reel and say, bring to my club, but ultimately they are that. They're highlight reels. You're only going to show the positives because you want to show the highlights. You're not showing the lowlights. So let's move on off of James Ward-Prowse. I think we probably spoke about him a lot over the time. And there's been a player that I think many fans want. I know me, Sloth, we definitely want him to, but I'm probably sure you probably want him as well. But Youssouf Fofana seems to be a player that is clearly causing some level of division within that committee. Now, the point from Steinberg is that it is Moyes has wavered on Fofana, and he has a preference for English Premier League players. Now, depending on your disposition, you can read that in two ways. One way is he is not keen on it. He's maybe backed down from a decision as to, well, let's maybe inquire and move forward, because actually I want Premier League players first. that's what I want. The other way to review it is he's decided on his defensive players, and now he's looking at his more attacking type midfielders, box-to-box midfielders, and in fact, he's now taken the decision or accepting the words that have been said by Tim Steynton and Mark Noble as well. Apparently, was very glowing. So maybe actually the wording is not as it should be, and in actual fact of what actually is that Moyes has wavered from his position of I want only Premier League to I'm going to take what Steynton has said, I'm going to take what Noble has said, and I'm going to entrust you to move forward with that. What camp do you guys sit in? Because I think you can sit in either camp, to be perfectly honest. So where are you guys kind of sitting with this? Do you think he's wavered on the positive, or do you think he is now just, putting down his flag and saying, nope, I do not want players from outside the English Premier League. I want these players from my midfield and these players only.
Go on, Slav.
Yeah, so love the player. Yeah, I'm in that camp with you guys. I think that he would do wonders. I think I sit in sort of where I can see what Moyes is thinking, where he hasn't played in the league, that's as physical. And I think that will be sort of a wake-up call for Fofana, though I think that he is definitely a player that I think will do wonderful right off the bat. But I think that would be sort of Moyes' sort of take. I also think David Moyes, he's going to sort of sit there and be like, I would rather Scott McTominay, and, sit there all day sort of being like, he's aggressive and progressive enough for me going forward. And I disagree on that, but love the player. I don't think that we're going to get him, because I think that we're in the camp that Moyes is sort of saying, yeah, great player, but I think we should look elsewhere first. I think we might come back around to him, though. Yeah,
and it's interesting, as you say, that if we have this committee and 2/3 of the committee are actually against the manager, then surely there needs to be a decision as to essentially David Moyes' two bosses, Mark Noble and Steynton, are saying, I believe you to be incorrect, that you maybe go with the boss's decision as opposed to, the next level down. Obviously, Moyes does pick the team. However, again, those two have an obligation to protect the integrity of West Ham's future over Moyes looking to protect the integrity of his next year and his next term of his contract, ultimately. So part of my question to you guys is, do you feel that maybe some of the targets, Moyes is actually being objective and actually looking at it as these players will be the players that are the right players for West Ham because they bring a longer term piece? Or do you think he's being more self-serving and purely going, I'm here for the year, I'm only interested in this year, I don't care about West Ham and what they spend on other players, I'm just going to demand they spend money on the players that I want for this year? How do you guys kind of feel?
I think that's giving Moyes... I don't know. I don't really think
that's... It's somewhere in between. Like, just in such fairness. I'm trying to be...
very fair to say that he would like do that deliberately. I do think, though, that there is a problem with our constant backing of the manager as opposed to a recruitment system. And if two of your three are saying go for him, you need to listen to them, because what is the point of sending Mark Noble to watch Monaco as often as he did if you're just going to overrule him because the manager doesn't like him? I think it's a very strange system if that's the case. And look, if he wants players who are there right in front of him every single week in the Premier League, that's a huge problem, and it should be a red flag for people. Like, I know there's a lot of comfort from signing players who are Prem proven, but there's also risk that they're not going to produce that form. And I do think that people are somewhat negating Moyes' eye for talent in certain departments, particularly in that midfield where we know he's missed out on the likes of Ruiz and even Maddison. I think that's a pretty bad
as well. When he first came to, he was incredible for Wolves for that period as well.
Yeah, it's a case of, I do think his judgment is often wavered by the fact that he wants things that wants players who he knows or, you know, perhaps provide him a bit of safety in some sense. People like to bark at me about the Bowen transfer and as some sort of like, you know, no, actually, you know, he can pluck these gems. Well, Bowen wasn't a gem. Bowen was known about for 3 years before he came
Bowen was happening before Moyes even came in. So
exactly.
that one's such an irrelevance and such a rewriting of history.
But again, I do think that, you know, it's a case of we need to think about recruitment for the club, not recruitment for the manager. The manager is there purely to make sure that they get the best results out of the players they have. If he wants to pick someone like James Ward-Prowse as a player we go all out for, then yeah, make that deal happen and deliver that. But don't give someone carte blanche and say, look, 2 of our 3 recommend them. However, it's all down to you at the end of the day. What do you want to do? Because that's not how a system should work. And there would be a lot of players in the Premier League who have shone. And, you know, a player who I think represents this Prem-proven ideology very, very well, and the risk that they have is Sterling. You know, he was absolutely tearing up trees at City, and don't get me wrong, I think he's a fantastic footballer, but he's gone to Chelsea and he's done nothing. Really.
Just Danny Ings, Premier League proven.
Well, I think Danny Ings is a harsh one because he wasn't playing. If we'd signed Watkins, we
did play him. We played him as a single striker, and the manager said that we need to find out and work out a way how to play him.
But despite that way being in front of us for about 5 years, I think it's just a worrying one. I think questions need to be asked if he's not totally convinced by 2 fellow staff at his club. Even Noble, someone he will know and will have spent years, you know, with. If he's still going, no, I don't trust you. Well, that's a bit worrying to me. Why can't you trust your colleague a little bit and say
it's his boss and it was his lieutenant for his time at West Ham? And if you can't trust him, then we really are in a predicament. If it's going to be that kind of, I don't want to say close-minded because that's a bit harsh, but if it's going to be that kind of I guess laser focus, let's say that instead, because that's a bit better. That laser focus on Premier League talent or ex-Premier League talent that he's maybe missing out. And I think, now I tend to agree with this from Bound Dawson as well, that he will do what he needs to survive. He knows he needs to survive this year. He needs to get through this year to either get himself a contract here or get himself a contract elsewhere. You can already see he's done the charm offensive on Celtic over this kind of thing when he was talking about Ange Postecoglou and so on. But moving away from the kind of midfield and that area that so we know we need to get absolutely right, and we seem to not at the moment kind of have a clear view as to what we're going for. Moving on to centre forwards, we've obviously seen some great positivity in this in the preseason, in that Scamacca, whilst he's maybe not looked that energetic, to put it politely, and he made a couple of mistakes in the Tottenham game, which were all pretty much inexcusable, really. He did then go on and score and get the winner, and he has scored in the pre-season. He's looked good when he's been in front of goal. Danny Ings is another who's looked quite lively playing in the front 2. More impressively is Mubama. So only reason I want to bring up Mubama is because obviously we need to get him on a long-term contract. I know you guys would agree, but that's the one I think is probably going to be one of the biggest things we need to do this summer, is get him and Bowen on new long-term deals and get those sorted and kind of managed. But, you know, we are potentially going to lose Mikel Antonio. He is rumoured to be drawing interest from the Saudi League. Danny Ings could be another one that we may see go as well. Those 2 could be used in which to fund another striker. Obviously, we have been linked with Brozier again, funnily enough, no surprise. Italian press saying that we are basically almost going to sign a player for as a centre forward. And then the next day, more news and more articles about Scamacca. I think it's the Italian press. I think anything as to West Ham or getting rid of a player as a centre forward or signing a centre forward with a big pinch of salt, because there's clearly a massive agenda in the Italian press for a Scamacca to come home, shall we say. But Habib Diallo is another one who's been linked. But first off, guys, well, how do you feel about Antonio going up? I think he probably does deserve now the big move. It may not be a big move in terms of a big player, but it is going to be a move that's going to secure him and his family very well financially for the rest of their life. And he's, based on what he's done for West Ham, it'd be hard to argue against him, not taking that opportunity to secure that type of, I guess, life-changing monetary deal. And I know he's already rich and so on, but this is money that sets you up for generations, not just for your life and maybe your kid. It's probably the next one as well. But anyway, I'll stop talking. You guys, how do you feel about the Antonio rumours and what could potentially come in, or what you would like to see come in?
Yeah, so with me, go ahead, Mick. I mean,
of course, you go on, mate. You crack on with this one. Go on.
Go ahead, Mick. Go get your money. I mean, he's deserved it. He's been a little divisive within the locker room this year. So I think that maybe there could have been a little sort of hinting at, he's out the door sometimes, stuff like that. But I think he was looking at either a move to America and the MLS eventually, and I think this is a better opportunity for him. I'm not one to sort of follow players off the pitch and sort of see what they do unless they're, severely in the news. But apparently he's broken up with his missus or something like that. And so maybe he doesn't want to go to Saudi, and be far away from his kids if they're separated now. But that's something I saw online. I don't take that with a grain of salt. But, again, similar to the Italian press, don't believe Twitter. But again, what I'd like to see, get as much as we can. Look at what Chelsea's been able to get from the Saudi league. So let's go fund a couple of these players that we want. So that's me. That's my take.
Just as a side note, guys, do you think there is, obviously we touched on Souček possibly going to draw interest. How do you guys feel, again, this is just a guess, but with Diaby now not going to the Saudi league and going off to Villa by the looks of things, do you think we may see a bid come in for Benrahma from the Saudi league to, again, it's a fairly big name, right kind of age, obviously with St. Maximin going, another Muslim player coming to the league. Do you guys feel that maybe West Ham may tout him as an alternative for clubs that were looking at Diaby, or to I think it's Al Nazir, wasn't it, who was looking at him? Maybe tout Benrahma out as a possible, again, to fund the window for another player?
I wouldn't be shocked. I just really think that it would be a really silly move. If we all want this idea of Prem proven, Benrahma's done it. And yes, he's infuriating. And he does lack the pace that someone like Borges has. But, I don't really understand why you sell him unless it is a silly money offer. If it is £60 million, you can't really say no to that. And again, he's going to set himself up for a long time. I do think that it's a bit of a naive argument that people are making a lot of excuses for these footballers, saying it's generational wealth. It's the chance to set yourself up. Well, if you're getting paid 50, 60 grand a week and you can't set yourself up for generations, then you've got a serious problem with money. There is something that needs to be looked at. That's my little view on that bit over. I'm not going to comment on that anymore because I've been told that I would go to Saudi Arabia if this money was on offer to me. No, I wouldn't. That's your answer there. That's your soundbite, whatever you want to do.
The RB has proved that not every footballer wants to go there for the money. He has
exactly. Let's face it, it's a joke of a league at the moment in terms of its quality. If you are a genuine professional footballer, you are not moving there. There's a reason why Neves has gone there, and it's because he was all hype. He was all fart and no poo at the end of the day. It was one of those where he was very, very good in games, but there's a reason top clubs didn't go for him. And I don't think anyone except players who know they're getting way more money than they'll ever earn on their ability alone, and potential moves to top clubs, and then players who are aging, they're going there because they can make it a little bit more marketable. Someone like Benrahma, I think, would be a really smart move for the Saudi league because he's going to appeal to that North African audience, and that's going to get their viewing numbers up. I do think, though, that, as I said, it would be a silly money offer that we should accept. It would only be that. I wouldn't sell him for 30 million. I probably wouldn't sell him for 40 million, because if you're talking about Barnes in that same sort of value wise, I do think that it's unfair to say Benrahma isn't worth that sort of money. And, you know, when you're talking about a joke league, you've got to demand more money. So I think we would be silly to sell him for less than silly money. And, you know, we've got players who can really step up next season. They can be given a lot more freedom on the pitch. And with this new supposed style, Benrahma is someone who can potentially really go to that next level. I wouldn't accept anything for him in terms of, you know, £30 million. I'd want more. And I would be looking at moving other players on. I wouldn't begrudge Antonio a move away. I've been very critical of him. I don't think I've ever been harsh in terms of what's not something that goes beyond, you know, I don't dislike Michail Antonio at all. This season, I think his professionalism has come up into question. I think this silly little podcast that he does, which I know is ironic, like I think his comments on that are very strange when you are a professional footballer, and I think that's probably why Moyes would look to move him on. But it's something that I wouldn't begrudge him. You know, he's worked hard for West Ham on the pitch. Again, that's something that I've questioned at times, his application, but I would not say a bad word about him in terms of his overall contribution to the club. He has only done positive things for us. Maybe not for a certain front of house in London, but I blame his Lamborghini for that.
I blame the snow, to be honest.
Okay. Yeah. But
he was a wonderful snowman, let's be honest. You know, I've not seen a more glorious snowman coming out of a hedge bedraggled like that in many a year.
I do think, though, that, you know, if an offer were to come in for him, let him go. You know, if he wants that kind of ride off in the sunset, he will only have positivity from West Ham fans, and that's how it should be. So I do think Benrahma could caught their attention, but I do think it would have to be silly money. Otherwise, we're just selling for the sake of selling, and I think that's silly.
Yeah,
I'm saying silly a lot.
You know, we've got you know, as a fair point here, Moyes has been laser focused on tactics based around Antonio for too long. Do you think that's the case? Do you think now is the right time? I think probably again, that's why we're looking at Cresswell going. It's the right time maybe for some of these players in the last year, their contracts, the elder players within our squad to move on to pastures new and us to maybe go in a slightly different direction. Do you think, yeah, this is the right time for Antonio? And do you think we're looking at the right type of players maybe even?
I mean, for me, if Moyes really wants that Red Bull model, it's been just given to him in Steeden. You know, if he wants to do that, adopt it, and we'll probably sign you to a longer term contract. You know, so yeah, it is time to sort of not clean out the sort of cupboards, but you know, it's time to refresh. I think. I mean, definitely great seeing, you know, 2 up top in the preseason, though it was, you know, 2 games, very small sample size. We didn't have, you know, majority of our starting players, but if we go down sort of that 2 up top and either a 3-5-2 or 4-4-2, I mean, that's great to see, rather than, you know, one guy standing up top, Antonio just winning balls and, you know, trying to then do something himself until everyone else catches up, you know, upfield. So
yeah, it would be nice not to have to, you know, in fairness to Antonio, he's blown up his arse after 60 minutes after time because he's having to do everything on his own, and it's just, it would be nice for a striker to be supported appropriately, so they're not having to just run their arse off for a full 90 minutes and, you know, essentially kill themselves for the cause, which Antonio has done for, you know, last year. It was inconsistent. Me and Slav have been, Slav even been quite critical of him last year because of that, and we felt that it wasn't the player we've seen in the previous years. But, should he go, he goes with, I think, for everyone, with, applause, because he's been such a great player for us. I love this comment. It just has to be thrown up. Hopefully there is loads of potato salad out there. Not because I want to get rid of Souček, but because we know that man runs on it and that is his fuel for great performances. But, and I think, again, much to the point we've been saying as to Moyes does want to hang around at West Ham. There's going to have to be, from him, a level of stepping back from his maybe, I don't want to say vanity, because that's probably a bit unkind, but he does need to relax his ideals and maybe listen to, I said, the new voice that has come in, listen to Noble, who are there, and start to actually, again, relinquish some level of control, because, again, he's only here for the year, so he's got to accept that he's maybe not going to have as much control, because they have to also think about, well, if you don't stay next year, we need to ensure that we have players that a new manager is going to want as well. So they have to have two heads on in the entire time, whereas Moyes is going to be obviously so focused on this 1 year and trying to convince either them to stay or to get himself a job elsewhere, that it could maybe blink at his attitude. So he does need to relinquish some level of control. But come to use the last kind of bit. So in terms of the strikers, obviously we've been linked to many. Habib is one that we've been linked to recently. David, João Felix is another. Vlahovic is another one that's come up today. I think someone was also suggesting earlier that there's been another podcast where, again, that man Origi has come back up. Again, Premier League proven and all of that. But from the strikers, is there anyone that hasn't been kind of talked about that you would be interested to see at West Ham, or do you kind of want to see West Ham maybe stick with Ings, with Scamacca and Mubama? I know, Sloth, you'd like Ings to be gone along with Antonio, but I'm gonna let Sloth go first.
I'm a huge fan of David. I think that he deserves sort of a jump up in sort of playing in the Premier League stage. Canada's rise before the World Cup coming up in 2026. I think that's, again, great marketing money. I was going to bring in for the midfield conversation the Musa and the Adams bit for marketing dollars, but park that for another time.
I think it's a valid point. We've said it constantly. If you just look at you talking the other day about Pulisic going to Milan and how much money that's brought in for them. So
their sales jumped up 255% month over month on merch, and it was 9% US sales before, now 43% US sales. So I mean, that's just incredible numbers. As an American here, just sort of saying,
it's a fact. Football is a business, and you need to buy players that will, in fact, improve your brand and improve your business. So, doing something as obvious as we'll sign an American for that American market, of course you would. It's like why you would go and sign Kamada for the Asian market, or you would go buy a South Korean player for that Asian market. It's just what you do. If you can find a player that's good enough within that region, you absolutely go out there because you generate. We did it with Chicharito. That's why we bought him. Really, it was for the marketing value.
Yeah, I mean, if you bring in Alvarez, Adams, and David, that's the three hosts of the 2026 World Cup. And by the way, two of them are captains of their countries. So, I mean, and one's the starting striker. So, I mean, you can't go wrong if you sign those three. But yeah, David, I think out of the striker options that we've been linked to would be great. I think that he gives us the ability to play in a 2 or as a wing or alone up top, which I don't think is his best position, though he plays there in Canada. So I think he can still score. But yeah, I think that I would rather stick, if I had starting tomorrow, it's Scamacca for me. I want to see what he can do. I think his comments that I feel like I can bag 20 goals next year, I think he can. I really do. But I think that if we can get David in there alongside of him, and if we go 4-4-2, keep Bowen on sort of the right mid side, I mean, that's a really great attack. And I'll leave it at that and go over to Sloth for his points.
Yeah. Come on, Sloth.
No, I think your point on David is a really good one. I've spoken about him for a long time, but I think Balogun is another one that we should be looking at. Obviously, Arteta made some comments about him saying he's like, a complete forward. And I really agree in terms of it's a case of him being. Oh, there we go. There's another good comment from Toby.
Toby straight on it.
yeah. It's. I think Balogun offers a lot of what Antonio did in terms of he runs those channels. He's big, he's physical, and in terms of his finishing, he is another level entirely in comparison to Antonio. He also counts as homegrown as well. So, you know, if he were to come in, not only is he going to boost our sales massively in America, because he's just scored his first international goals, and, you know, he's very much a star on the rise. Even if we were to pay, say, £35 million, and I do think it would be hard dealing with Arsenal after the Rice scenario, I do think it would be money well spent. If that money were able to buy David, I think I would probably choose. Well, I would definitely choose David just because he's done it more over a longer period of time. And as you said, Slob, he is versatile. He can play across that attack. And if we were to say lose Antonio for even £20 million, which I think would be a good coup, but I do think we could get more from the Saudi League for him, especially if they're offering 50 odd million for Mitrovic. I think we could probably get 30 million. If we have that money, I think that probably you just need about 35 million to get David, I think. And that's another really big boost to the squad. Someone who can play out wide, someone who can play off Scamacca, play Justin behind him as well. You are adding pace, strength, and great finishing ability. A player who I do think we might move for is Diallo. We've spoken about him for a long time. He does offer a lot of what Ivan Toney offers at Brentford. And obviously, I think they're going to be going for him in a big way because Ivan Toney is what a lot of West Ham fans view Antonio as, in terms of he's so vital in the way they play and scoring goals for that team, creating goals for that team. He is pivotal in their attack. Diallo pretty much is another Ivan Toney in the way that he plays, his physicality, his ability in the air, his strength to hold off defenders. And I had a kind of a sneaking suspicion that we would potentially move for Toney in the summer had this gambling ban not come into place. I think he would have been a big way that we spent the Rice money had that ban not come into place. But, you know, a butterfly's wings and all that jazz, it's kind of not worked out. I do think, though, that Diallo would be a great option. Whether we need more homegrown players or not could potentially make up the centre forward position, and, you know, could maybe see us move for Balogun. Another exciting option is a player I'm a big fan of, Hugo Ekitike, who has moved to PSG, and it's not quite worked out. I don't think that's through any fault of his own. No, he's scored goals when he's played. He has got a record of about 1 in 2 when he plays, whether it's goals or assists. It's very impressive for a player of his age. And again, he's someone who can play wide, but is 6'3" and good in the air, very athletic, and works hard. So I think he could be someone to look at, particularly after the Kehrer deal went quite well. We could maybe look to use a bit of that sort of friendliness with PSG to get that deal done. But in terms of forwards, I think we have to be sort of realistic and say, if we're going to stick with Ings, we need to play 2 up top. That probably means we need another striker anyway, because if Ings get injured or Scamacca gets injured, then we need to be able to change. So I do think there will be movement on that. Definitely if Antonio goes, I just hope we get a good fee for him, and I hope he gets a good wage packet out of it.
Yeah, Slot, as an impartial advisor, observer, even, who do you think will generate more money, the American or the Canadian?
So right now, I'd actually say David would generate more money today. But given the fact that Balogun's only played in one tournament for the USA, scored one goal, he's going to be the number 9 going into the next World Cup if he stays healthy. You know, the marketing material that's going to come out over Christmas this year, throughout next year, everything like that, he's going to be a main focal point. Him, Pulisic, Adams, Turner, the keeper. I think that's who they're going to sort of push. So, yeah, we want to have someone that's going to generate a lot of money, and he will. He's going to be talisman. You look at Josie Altidore back when he was the talisman for the US, and how much money he was raking in for clubs. So Clint Dempsey as well for Fulham, same thing.
Yeah, we'll wrap it up there, guys. It's been we've gone over the hour mark, so let's wrap it up there. But just as a little bit of a fun one, if I just find it here, who has the best beard?
I just got a cut, so yeah.
I think if we're going for full on beard, I think we got to go for yeah. I think
no, come on.
It's all on Sloth here. I think when you talk about the best beard, it's cultivated. That's what it is.
You've all got glorious beards, gentlemen. It's thank you very much for your kind words, though.
It seems to be a prerequisite. We need to get Frankie on the beard front. It's letting the side down.
I do remember us talking about a comment that said that you and I are the same person, pretty much, and I think it is moving that way, isn't it? It seems to be like we've spent so much time chatting together that we're just going to start morphing into the same person.
We'll just have one screen going forward.
Yeah, exactly. Just one screen. It's going to be like 3D, just both of us superimposed over one another. That would be the future of it. But anyway, guys, thanks for coming on tonight. Thanks for talking through the myriad of players at West Ham are always linked to. I think on one of the other West Ham channels, they've done a counter. I think we've exceeded over 100 already this window. I think we're now in 120 kind of mark. So, yeah, as ever with West Ham, we're always linked with players. And hopefully we'll start to see more kind of surprise deals like the Borgers one today, where we just get an announcement saying something has been agreed. So let's just hope that's what happens for the rest of the season. I'd like to have some surprises in a world where, and in a time of football where you don't get many. It was quite a nice one today just to see that flash up. So it'll be great to have one or two others appear as well along the rest of this window. But everyone, please do subscribe if you haven't subscribed. Thanks everyone for watching. Really appreciate it. And that is it from us tonight. We will do another live show probably next week to round up the other 150 or 60 players that we're probably going to be linked to over the next week as well. But yeah, everyone have a good week. It's almost the weekend, so have a good weekend, everyone. And guys, as ever, one last thing, and that is...
Come on, you Irons.